makers and market movers. This is The Pulse with Francine Lacqua.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to The Pulse. I'm Francine Lacqua here in London with the conversations that matter, and here's what's coming up on today's program. France narrowly escapes a recession while the Spanish economy soars, offering hope that the euro area can also dodge a downturn. Saudi Aramco abandons a plan to boost its oil output capacity in a huge reversal that will raise questions about the kingdom's view on future oil demand. Plus, Elon Musk says the first human patient has received a brain implant from his startup Neuralink, which aims to one day let humans control computers with their minds. Now, also coming up, interviews with the hedge fund pressuring BP to bolster oil and gas. We'll also speak to the chief executives of the Italian gas network operator Snam and Novonesis. This is a new biotech company formed by the biggest merger in Danish history. Now, first thing is first, let's take a look at the European markets map. There is, I have to say, quite a lot going on. We look at also the UK. We had store inflation, looking at the easing somewhat of the cost of living crisis. We have the Bank of England looking at the credit markets. We're also getting that German preliminary fourth quarter GDP falling 0.3%, pretty much as expected. Now, we were, of course, reminded also by Oliver Crook, who was on air looking at some of the downfalls of the German economy, exactly the kickstart, some of the reforms, and whether at some point they will kick in. We did speak to the German finance minister just a couple of weeks ago, where he says, look, this is not the sick man of Europe. It just needs a coffee, and it's a tired man for the moment. The other thing we look at, of course, is earnings. There's a big test for a lot of the tech companies. Today, I think investors are looking forward to a rush of major earnings for insights on whether the record-breaking rally on Wall Street can continue, which is why we're seeing maybe a little bit of muted stocks across the board here in Europe. Now, we're joined by Morgan Deladon, the head of investment strategy of Global X ETFs, to look at the markets today and beyond. We're also joined by Bloomberg's Justina Lee. So thank you both for joining us. Justina, brain implants. I don't know whether to cry or to laugh or what to make of this. I mean, stocks, I think, in China are really soaring on the back of this.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it sounds like something out of science fiction, right? But Elon Musk his company has kind of put this product for the first time in an actual patient. And the vision there is that one day, the people with quadriplegia will be able to control computers with their minds, and that will certainly be a great improvement to kind of their lifestyle. And what kind of Elon Musk said on X is that they're seeing promising neuron spike detection. And what that means is that they are getting those recordings from the patient's brain. And so it kind of seems like they already have a name for the first product, and it will be called telepathy. And, of course, it's still a long way to actually being a product that will be widely available. I mean, they plan to do 11 more surgeries kind of this year. And so it's kind of a few more steps to kind of proving that it works and that it's safe for humans.
Yeah, it is just quite an incredible story. And I do think, and it's not all Chinese stocks. I misspoke. It's obviously not all Chinese stocks that are gaining on the back of it, but it's Chinese stocks that are actually in the space that really got a boost. Morgan, away from, brain implants, which also technologically could be a game changer, we also just look at the Fed and PCE to try and understand what inflation does. Are you expecting as many cuts as actually the market's pricing in?
I think there is a mismatch, definitely, because when we look at what the market is expecting still now, over 5 cuts for this year, it's a lot given the strength of the U.S. economy. And last week, GDP numbers came out much better than expected, while core PCE is now not far off the objective of 2%. So what it means is, even with very tight monetary policy in the U.S., the Fed is achieving its goal of a soft landing towards its objective of maximum employment and price stability. So with everything in mind, I mean, the Fed is definitely going to consider, I think, at the next meeting, starting debate on whether bringing back interest rates to more neutral territory. But I think it's quite premature to think about the Fed turning dovish. There is no urgency for the Fed to cut, given the direction the economy is taking.
And of course, Maria, I mean, we have this jobs report, right? That will be very interesting ahead of the May decision.
So if the job report is actually surprising the market with an overshoot of 3.8% for unemployment rate in the US, which is what the market is expecting. Maybe there will be some volatility around this, but I would expect the job reports to be still strong this week, and therefore I think the Fed is having a little bit pressure off his back to act preemptively.
And Justine, I mean, there was an auction. The auctions are a little bit, or they actually announced how many auctions that they'll put, and they were a little bit, I think, lower than expected. Is there anything else on the Fed Treasury front that you're looking at?
Yeah, I think a really big question for the Fed right now is that even though it is true that U.S. economy has been pretty resilient, I think there's been a lot of chatter recently on the real interest rate. Because as you have kind of inflation coming down, what that means is that, minus inflation, the real interest rate has actually kind of gone up given where kind of the Fed funds rate is at. And so there's sort of this narrative out there that does the Fed need to cut just to kind of make sure that they're not still tightening the economy, and given that we might still have lagged effects from tightening earlier, kind of still to ripple through the economy.
Justina, it's a big week, of course, for the Bank of England. And then we have this report about stability, maybe them now looking at some of what's going on in credit. I mean, is the BOE now behind the curve in how many, and what it's doing monetary policy-wise?
Yeah, I think that really is a good question here, because we're kind of seeing in a lot of different markets that inflation is coming down, but occasionally you kind of get a little bit of hiccup. It does seem like there was some part of inflation that looked entrenched. I mean, you just look at the Spanish numbers today, still running pretty hot. And I think that is the question here, like, will the BOE kind of act, after the Fed, after the ECB, kind of given the inflationary dynamics here.
And so, Morgan, it's going to be very interesting to see how actually Andrew Bailey, the governor, navigates this in the press conference on Thursday.
Yes, and to Justina's point, I mean, real interest rates, when you look at the UK compared to Europe or the US, in terms of real interest rates, they are lower. So the maneuver that the Bank of England has is actually tighter than the rest of central banks. It's going to be very interesting, but I think they won't, as Justina pointed out, they won't overreact to inflation, given that they're still running far above their objectives.
Morgan, also, I mean, the other thing, I mean, commodities is really left, right, and centre today. We're trying to figure out what the Saudi Aramco news means for actually how they believe markets will absorb oil, going forward, actually oil demand. How do you see that navigating? Is it range-bound?
It could be, at least for the next several weeks, up to months, given that oil prices seems to still have some geopolitical premium in the prices that actually prevent oil prices to go down and reflect the gradual deterioration of the global economy. So I think that is why we're seeing the range bound in oil prices. But I think it's likely to be a more downward trend towards the end of half of the year, and the end of the year, because the deterioration of the economy is going to be more material.
Justina, we're also expecting, I mean, it's the second day in a row where actually European markets kind of open very tentative. I think they want to know what's happening in the U.S. It's all about earnings.
Exactly. I mean, we have all the big tech earnings this week, Microsoft and Alphabet, of course. And I think the big question here is, can they justify their valuations? You had JP Morgan strategists saying overnight that this is looking a bit like a dot-com era rally, which is a pretty kind of big warning to issue there. But I think what they're kind of getting at is that, I mean, it's true that these Magnificent Seven stocks have posted pretty decent results. But at this point, with a U.S. market that's almost, near as concentrated as it's been in kind of many, many decades, can they really kind of justify those valuations, especially if we're going to go into a slower economic growth environment?
And you're seeing also that demand and that interest basically in cloud computing transfer into what your clients are asking from ETFs.
Yes. So just looking at what happened last year, even with high interest rates, the Magnificent Seven caught 60% of the performance of the S&P 500. It's massive. And it's really underlying the trend that there is digitization of the economy underway. So these companies are still innovating, as you just pointed out, with the implant in the brain. Interest rates don't stop innovation, so I do think that the growth potential is still here. On cloud, we've seen a lot of inflows into these strategies because cloud is potentially the first beneficiary of innovations in AI, but also quantum technology. So we really have to now look at these themes as an ecosystem building up as a new sector of the economy, a digital sector.
Yeah, so interesting. I mean, I think of superheroes every time I hear like Magnificent Seven. I don't know whether that's a good or a bad thing. Yeah, it does sound like that. Morgan Deladon, head of investment strategy Europe at Global X ETFs, actually globally now, head of investment, I think, and Bloomberg's Justina Lee. Both, thank you so much for coming. Now, coming up, we'll be speaking to the co-founder of Bluebell Capital Partners after the hedge fund called on BP to bolster investments into oil and gas and also cut spending on clean energy. We speak to Giuseppe Bivona next. This is Bloomberg. Well, Saudi Aramco has abandoned the plan to boost its oil output capacity. It's a huge reversal that will raise questions about the kingdom's view on future oil demand. Now, the surprise move comes after the world's biggest oil exporter had said in November that it was progressing very well with a project to boost capacity to 13 million barrels a day by 2027. Now, staying with oil, and a hedge fund, Bluebell Capital, has called on BP to bolster investments into oil and gas and cut spending on clean energy. Now, it says the company's shift away from fossil fuels is misguided and weighing on the share price. While BP maintains its strategy is still to move into clean energy, but it will continue to invest, they say, in oil and gas. Well, in recent years, Bluebell has launched campaigns against high-profile companies, including the French food group Danone, the British drug maker GSK, and German chemical producer Bayer. Now, for more on all of this, we're joined by the Chief Investment Officer and partner at Bluebell Capital Partners, Giuseppe Bivona. Giuseppe, thank you so much for joining us. So, first of all, can we start with the basics? How big is your position in BP?
Is undisclosed because it's below reporting threshold, and our policy, we don't disclose a stake.
So are you willing to take on a bigger stake? What is your plan right now?
Oh, no, it's clearly, it's undisclosed the position we have, but obviously it's a very significant position for our fund. And let me frame the discussion in the right way, telling, first of all, what we have not asked BP. Because I think it's very important, to get to what is our position. I want to make very clear that we have not asked BP essentially to stop investment in clean energy. We are not asking, and we're not asking, we not intend not to ask BP to renegade on that net zero in 2050, which is an objective we absolutely share. So in a nutshell, we're not asking BP to renegade on the strategy. Instead, what are we asking them? Well, we are asking them to recognize that, the condition in the energy demand and supply are rapidly changing. Therefore, and today demand is in oil is stronger a few years ago, and therefore they should abandon mechanistic target to cut supply.
Yes, but Giuseppe, so we understand correctly, and I know you don't want to disclose, or you don't have to disclose your position in BP because you're under, the threshold. But can you give us an idea on how big a position? And again,
look, I can tell you, our fund.
How much are you going to go to?
Our fund is it's roughly, we have a AUM of 450 million, and cyclically we have as much as a co-investment on other vehicles. And we invest in a very concentrated portfolio of, say, 12, 30 stock, not necessarily equally sized. So I think this gives you an order of magnitude of what our stake in BP is. It is a big position for our fund, and I think we are well known to be relentless in pursuing our active strategy, no matter how big our stakes are.
So, Giuseppe, have you spoken to other investors who share your view?
Obviously, I think there was our interest became public essentially very recently. I think, obviously, we already have certain exchange of views, and there will be more of a debate going forward. But, as I was saying, I think it's important to understand the position. And the position is that, in our view, BP is doing the right things in targeting net zero in 2050, but there is no point of cutting supply when demand is there, at least in the short term. And secondly, it is absolutely fine for us continue to invest in clean energy, provided the two conditions are met. The company invests in business where it has the right to win, so where there's competent skills in order to succeed, and also invest in business where they target a return above the cost of capital. Now, the company is planning to invest. Sorry,
no, Mr. Bivona, so I understand. So you're basically saying that you know what you're asking is for them to abandon basically this mechanistic target to cut oil supply. You're not asking BP to go out and buy assets that, for example, Chevron selling or Exxon is selling, or increase exploration activities.
Correct. We are asking BP to adopt the same flexibility which they already adopted, for instance, in February 2023, when they increased production target within the framework of the strategy from 1.5 to 2 million barrels per day. We think that conditions have changed, and they warrant a similar action by increasing production from 2 to 2.5. But BP has self-inflicted, and I would say inflicted on the shareholder, Scope 3 reduction target in 2025 and 2030, which essentially means they have to cut production. This is wrong for the shareholder, but it's wrong for society at large. BP board, unless they change this target, they are really making a favor to the shareholder of Exxon, Chevron, Total, and Shell. But obviously, you know, the board is not paid by those shareholders; it's paid by us.
Saudi Aramco today dropped a plan to boost capacity. This was a major U-turn. Do you think they're seeing peak oil? And again, how does that translate into what BP should be doing?
Look, it's very obvious from any data that we are late in our plans on energy transition. It doesn't mean we are not going to get there. I think there is a lot of data already telling us that it's going to be extremely hard to get to net zero in 2050. So, I mean, the most sensitive approach to have a smooth transition is to adapt, you know, to this changing condition and adjust supply according to demand. You know, I would almost say this is common sense.
Mr. Bivona, of course, you have said that you would have asked for Looney's resignation had he not already, of course, resigned. Are there any changes in the leadership of BP that you will be pushing for now?
But of course, no. I mean, we just got a new CEO appointed. There was an internal solution. We are very open to see, you know, with what Murray would say. He was part of the team, probably who set the strategy, which we are asking not to change but to adapt. I believe that the new CEO it represents a great opportunity to look to the business with fresh eyes and asking about the historical underperformance of BP vis-a-vis his peer, both in the US and in Europe, and the undemanding depressed valuation of the stock. For us, I mean, if the company will adjust production to demand and will stop deploy capital in projects where they target return below the cost of capital, it will lead to a significant repricing of the stock.
I mean, what do you say to critics that say it's odd that you were asking, for example, for BlackRock chief Larry Fink to resign because he was not doing enough on ESG, and now you want BP to change to invest more in oil and gas?
No, that's not correct. We have been asking the resignation of Larry Fink, not because he's not doing enough or doing too little or too much, because he's not doing what he said he was doing. So the main critique in relation to BlackRock is the inconsistency of their action with the ESG strategy. In the case of BP, you know, it's a totally different story. We share the position of BP in terms of, you know, the long-term direction of this journey, but we think it's irrational and insane, you know, to not to adjust and not to be flexible when the situation changes. Clearly, we learn what does it means relying on energy stability. You know, you've seen the war in Ukraine. We see the situation in the Middle East. So BP has to adjust its strategy. That's really what we're asking.
All right, Giuseppe, thank you so much for your time today. That was the Chief Investment Officer and Partner at Bluebell Capital Partners, Giuseppe Bivona. Now, let's just remind you of BP's response. It maintains its strategy is still to move into clean energy, but it will continue, they say, to invest in oil and gas. We'll have plenty more in our top news today. This is Bloomberg.
We are looking for improvement in the second half on our top line versus what we delivered in the first half, and we're looking at gradual improvement, and that's off the back of gradual improvement in North America. We also announced that we look to reduce the inventory levels in Latin America back to an appropriate level for the consumer environment there, and we're still looking at growth across our other regions. As a reminder, we had good growth in Europe and Asia Pac and Africa.
That was the Diageo Chief Executive Deborah Crew there. Now, the company is one of the biggest fallers on the Euro stocks after disappointing sales and earnings in the 6 months to December. This is Bloomberg. Now, the Italian and Spanish economies both expanded more than expected, France escaping a recession, but Germany remained the weak spot as the Eurozone tries to actually avoid a downturn. Now, Saudi Aramco abandons a plan to boost its oil output capacity in a huge reversal that will, of course, raise questions about the kingdom's view on future oil demand. And Elon Musk says the first human patient has received a brain implant from his startup Neuralink, which aims to one day let humans control computers with their minds. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to The Pulse. I'm Francine Lacqua here in London. Now, Italy's gas network operator, Snam, says it will increase investment in the country's energy infrastructure to more than 11 billion euros by 2027. Now, that includes the transport, storage, and distribution of liquefied natural gas, which has been, of course, a key part of Europe's move away from Russian pipeline gas following the invasion of Ukraine. While Snam is also grappling with geopolitical tension in the Middle East, the company has said it does not think the Red Sea shipping turmoil will have a significant impact for Europe in the short term. Well, Snam Chief Executive Stefano Venier joins us now for an exclusive conversation. Thank you for joining us. I mean, it's great to have you in the program because we talk a lot about energy security, energy supply, and some of the concerns that we have over the Red Sea. Are you confident that actually things will quieten down?
I think so. And I mean, at least in the short term, because I mean, we have one security that is guaranteed by the level of the storages we have in Italy and all across Europe. We have more than 70% fulfillment in the storages that do represent, let's say, a large amount of potential supply for the market. And we are in the middle of the winter yet. And therefore, we have still 2 months left. And therefore, I think we are pretty confident that the situation in the Middle East will not impact in the short term, of course, in a direct mean. In the midterm, could be slightly different, of course.
And so what's your biggest concern going forward? I know there's also, the Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni, trying to find agreements with African countries to get, to make sure that there's energy security, certainly in Italy and the rest of Europe. Are you confident that things will get easier from here?
I think the first target we should have is to recreate flexibility in the energy system all across Europe. I mean, to tackle with the shortfall in the Russian supplies, we had to use all the spare capacity we have on the LNG, on the pipeline transportation, using the supplies, the additional supplies from Norway and Algeria. So now we have to find a new settlement going forward that further expand the options for sourcing the gas all across the world, and LNG is the solution, increasing the LNG capacity. Of course, Middle East could be in the middle term a good opportunity thanks to the developments offshore Israel, but of course the situation can influence the timing in the development of in the taking of those decisions. And on the other side, of course, the initiatives that has been put in place is in the short term to secure additional supplies of gas, but in the midterm also to support a transition, because I think at the end of the day, more and more security and transitions are two sides of the same coin.
And you mentioned the medium term, and we were studying with the newsroom some of your facilities, some of the floating facilities, some of the floating storages also you have in Piombino. Like, what are some of the medium term concerns that you have, and is there anything that you can do to protect basically that passage?
I think what we are doing is exactly to expand in this LNG capacity. We will have an additional, let's say, floating vessel coming on stream in 2025 that will expand for additional 5 BCM the capacity of the country. And so we have now 5 possible, let's say, corridors for sourcing the gas via pipe and 5 LNG facilities in the country. And therefore, it's giving some, let's say, comfortable in terms of, let's say, options we can play with. And the third is the construction of a new backbone from south to north that has a strategic role not only for Italy but also for Europe, because we have, as a matter of fact, as Italy, as Snam, we have an export capacity that is more than 16 BCM of gas per year, and that can be supplied or can be go through Austria and Switzerland to the central part of Europe.
And this is kind of like the backpin of what you've laid out also to investors last week. How quickly can you become a significant exporter to Central Europe?
Yeah, we have been exporters last year for 4 BCM, 3 BCM, 2022, 3 BCM in 2023. And we have already available this capacity. The 6.5 BCM through Austria has been already booked by the shippers. Of course, they use it opportunistically to that extent. But the capacity is already there. And with the completion of the Adriatic backbone, we will increase that capacity up to 10 BCM through Austria.
In what time frame?
Yeah, by 2027, yes.
And so what are the main challenges there? Again, it's probably not funding. Is it, I mean, what are still the steps that you worry about from now to getting to that place?
I think we have done the most, in the sense that we have got also the support from the European Union through the REPowerEU funds that will cover part of the investment, at least roughly 20%. The rest will be, of course, funded by the company. And we have a tight time schedule. We will open the works next April, May. And from then we have 3 years to deploy the 400 kilometers backbone, the new backbone.
Can you talk to me about hydrogen? So this is one of the other things we're trying to figure out. Is exactly some of the, I guess, the challenges to export some of the hydrogen from Algeria, North Africa, back home.
Yeah, that is part of the so-called South H2 corridor. That is one of the 5 corridors that the European Union has identified as a core corridors to, let's say, import, since 50% of the hydrogen that will cover the demand in Europe by 2030 has to come from import, and 40% can come from the North Africa and through the South H2 corridor. South H2 corridor connects Algeria and Tunisia to the Bavaria, let's say. And as Snam, we have, of course, the piece in Italy. We have a controlling stake in Tunisia and controlling stake also in Austria. So we have a sort of, let's say, we are playing a role to coordinate. Of course, demand and production of hydrogen has to come, because we, as infrastructure player, we can put the pipes, and the great advantage we have on this South H2 corridor is the fact that with the completion of the Adriatic backbone, we will have 3 pipes going from North Africa to, let's say, Bavaria. And that will leave us the flexibility to use one of these 3 pipes to ship the hydrogen, let's say, in parallel with the gas molecules, and managing the switch off.
Carbon capture storage. Talk to me about that. Great. Is the EU is the EU ambitious enough, and can actually Italy play a real role for also the rest of Europe?
Again, we are trying to take advantage from some features that we have as Italy. In the hydrogen, we are a sort of bridge. In the carbon capture, we are developing a project with ENI to store the CO2 in depleted gas field in the shallow water, just 7 miles from the coast. That makes it very convenient, very cheap in interconnecting, and also this gas fields that has plenty of capacity, up to 500 million tons, are just in front of the Pianura Padana. That is the part of Italy where you have the high concentration of hard-to-abate industries, and Ravenna can receive also via shipping the CO2. So it's an ideal situation. We will start testing this summer with the pilot phase.
Talk to me about asset sales. Is there anything that you want to actually get rid of to use the money for elsewhere?
What we are doing right now is to, let's say, test the market for a stake in the interconnection between UK and Belgium, where we have slightly more than 20%. That is the first part of the business the portfolio we are looking at. So in the next future, of course, but we don't need to do that in the sense that the balance sheet has the flexibility. Right. We have 2 billion euros flexibilities, also in spite of the 11.5 billion euros of investment we will carry out by 2027. So we have plenty of flexibility. It's just an opportunity we can take to optimize the portfolio, let's say, consistently with what we said to the market. We have 3 clusters of stakes. Some are very strategic and some others are more opportunistic.
So where do you put, for example, De Nora Hydrogen Specialist? Is it something that you would, that you'd be looking to sell off completely?
Not for the time being. Not for them being. Last year we sold 5% to increase the liquidity of the stock and to let the value of the company to come up. But of course we have certain synergies. We are developing with them the first gigafactory for, let's say, electrolyte components, and of course they are consistent with these first steps of development of the hydrogen production, because we all have to make, those first projects to be on stream, to test it and to see how they work, and to that extent they are very complementary in terms of technological know-how, and with us with some pilot projects.
But you could sell a bigger stake. Is it something that you'd be looking at potentially, or
it's something that we might look in the future when we will see the right price, of course, in the long run.
Very interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Stefano Vignier there, the SNAM Chief Executive Officer. Now, coming up, Novozymes becomes Novonesis after the biggest merger in Danish history, and we'll be speaking to the President and Chief Executive of the new biotech company. That's coming up next, and this is Bloomberg. Welcome back, everyone. The biggest merger in Danish history has just been completed, with the biotech companies Novozymes and Christian Hansen combining to form Novonesis. Now, the new company has one of the world's biggest libraries of commercial enzymes and microbiomes, which are being used, for example, to tackle food intolerances and improve shelf life. Well, joining us now from Copenhagen is Esther Bijget, the President and Chief Executive of Novonesis. Thank you so much for joining us. Ms. Bijget, and congratulations actually on also this massive deal. What's your biggest hope for the company going forward? I know there's a number of things that you're working on, including fermentation, precision fermentation, I guess plant-based as veganism picks up. Where do you see yourself in 2 years?
Beautiful, Francine, and thank you for this fantastic introduction. You described it perfectly. The amazing company that we have created, by combining 2 extraordinary companies that together they are even better, even stronger, even better equipped to provide the answers of the future, to provide value-added solutions for our customer. And to your question, what is the biggest hope? I would say it's not a hope. You're going to see it's a reality. We're going to make this happen. And we're going to continue to be enabler of answers for a healthier planet and a healthier life. Today, the aggregated sales of Novonesis, more or less 50-50. 50% of our sales, they already contribute to healthier lives, to sustainable agricultural, to healthier nutrients, to value-added ingredients in nutrition to give that flavor and a customer experience, consumer experience without compromising health. And 50% of our sales, they enable a healthier planet, lower chemicals use, lower CO2 emissions, biofuels that lead to up to 60% lower CO2 emissions. And we're going to continue to be boldly, firmly investing in both. We are a biotech company. We master the art of science, of bringing solutions inspired by nature at scale. And that's the value that we bring. Go ahead, sorry.
When you look, for example, at precision fermentation, which is basically, I think, a very similar process to insulin making, but you make protein instead of feeding microbes bribes in a tanks. Again, how big do you think this market will be internationally? Like, how much will that grow?
Enzymes are precision fermentation. Enzymes is just one type of proteins. So the capabilities that we put with this company, it is the bioengineering and the high scale and the capability to bring solutions at scale. So not only design, but bring them at scale reliably and technically. coupled with also the deep understanding of the microbiome from a strong presence on dairy and health that Christian Hansen has. We see a need in the market for doubling protein need demand that cannot be fulfilled from only the heritage solutions of the past. And here we're going to be actively present through the enzymes that lead the extraction of the protein, through the microbes that make to the fermentation of the dairy ingredients, but also with high-value proteins that they bring that texture, that flavor, that just experience, and also in nature and in respect with health. That's going to be a component of our growth. Actually, we just started a plant in Blair last year, and we see already the first sales of our solution moving and having an impact as an active ingredient on plant-based meat. So many more to come, and that's one of the key areas that Novo Nordisk is going to show its unleashed potential.
I was going to ask you, actually, when you look at certainly European tastes cutting back on meat, how will you tap into that? Is it veganism, plant-based, solutions for meat, or is it something else? I don't know how our taste buds and also what we use and consume will evolve.
The way that we see it, it is more than we see it as an alternative to meat. The consumer need in a growing population, it's a 50% increase of protein demand. So it's not one or the other. It's simply offering a toolbox of offers and alternatives to the consumers. It's going to be meat in the future. And we, by the way, Novo Nordisk is present in that by enabling and bringing solutions to lead to healthier chickens, healthier swines, and also with a higher yield on nutrition. But it's also going to be a continuous increase pool for other alternatives to fulfill that protein demand. And plant-based meat is going to be a growing one and a stronger component of that in the future. And we are going to be an enabler of making that happen.
Esther, last year was definitely the year for weight loss drugs. And we've seen that a massive space. Again, when you look at the dietary shifts, what surprised you the most in the last 12 to 24 months that gives us a good picture of where we'll be in the future?
Surprise is a big word. I wouldn't call it surprise. I think maybe the realization and the fact and the visual proof that the power of biotechnology, it's immense, and we're only starting to unleash it. And then that one change or one lead, it brings into another. Yes, there is amazing solutions for weight loss, but that also brings opportunities for solutions with higher protein content. There is a need for changing the nutritional habits. So the disruption that the novelties created by science brings endless opportunities for also biosolutions across many other steps of the value chain.
Yeah, which is extremely interesting. And so for the ones really that are trying to figure out, what do you see as the biggest market potential in terms of these changes?
We see from one side the consumers' awareness and conscious of health. It's continuously to be there, and the need of opportunity of changing nutritional habits, and then that it need to be the taste and flavor should not be compromised. But then there is a need of boosting and active ingredients that can be probiotics, that can be also high-value proteins, that they fulfill the nutritional needs from the consumers, that they keep evolving. And biosolutions are present in all of them. And I think I mentioned that before, right? It's either on how you extract the proteins or how you grieve the functionalization, the texture, or how you add value added, but without chemicals, and in solutions that they are clean label and they good to give both texture experience and health.
Yeah. I know one of the things we've been trying to track is some of the vegan but also veggie innovations that were very strong in 2022, maybe 2023, saw a little bit of a pullback. So are you going to see a lot of volatility again in how our tastes, for example, for fake meat actually ends up? Are you seeing volatility, or how do you track that?
I would rather focus on the latter. It's volatility. So it's the need is there of growing demand, and then the suite of options that the consumers will have will continue to grow. But then that's not a linear path. We see our customers slowly and firmly demanding, but not everybody also has been growing in the same trajectory. So that's the disruption, or that's the volatility that we're seeing. And the underlying momentum continues to be solid growth. It's only not linear. No disruption in the market is ever linear. And what it's important is to look at the long term. Also, what is important is to pause and look on where we are versus what we're coming, and see that the value that we bring into our customers, it has a strong pull. So we believe that the plant-based proteins and alternative meat solutions will be a stronger enabler of the future, coupled with many other solutions to fulfill the consumer needs.
It's so interesting. Thank you so much, Esther Baijet, there, the President and Chief Executive Officer of this newly created Novo Nordisk. I'm sure we'll see a lot more of you, Esther, so thank you so much for joining us today. Coming up, Elon Musk says the first human patient has received a brain implant from his startup Neuralink. While the company aims to one day let humans control computers with their minds, that story is up next, and this is Bloomberg. Welcome back, everyone. Now, Elon Musk says the first human patient has received a brain implant from his startup Neuralink. It's a significant step forward for the company that aims to one day let humans control computers with their minds. Well, joining us now is Matt Bloxham from Bloomberg Intelligence. Matt, honestly, my mind is blown. I know this was coming, but actually when you read it first thing in the morning or you see it on X, you kind of think, wow, it's really happening. So, I mean, is this good or bad?
Well, I mean, I think hopefully it's a good development, and obviously Elon Musk has always said he wants to develop these kind of technologies in a kind of safe and responsible way for humankind. So hopefully he's going to be true to that. I mean, obviously it's very early stage, and there's a huge amount of trials and an evaluation to kind of to take place before we're kind of anywhere for this kind of being a mainstream development. But yeah, the kind of, I guess the thing that's exciting for me is kind of obviously it's helpful for people from a health perspective,
yes.
but the potential to extend these kind of technologies into mainstream kind of consumer electronics, the evolution of the smartphone is something we talk about all the time, and whether these kind of technologies can be adapted to kind of evolve, that kind of technology would be quite something.
But can it? And I'm kind of with you, right? It's immensely exciting and a massive opportunity for people that need to communicate that haven't been able so far. Mm-hmm. I guess who regulates it if then becomes, a consumer good like you buy
exactly,
your iPhone?
yeah. I mean, it's kind of because it blurs both the health side and the technology side. Yeah, there could be lots of different agencies involved in how this stuff evolves. So I think it's an incredibly complex field. Yeah. It's going to take quite some years, I think, before we kind of see this, beyond kind of these kind of hopefully positive trials.
Matt, I want to talk to you about this for years and hours, but we do have earnings, the fabulous 7.
Yes, yeah, and obviously first up we've got Microsoft and Alphabet later today, and I think people are relatively optimistic about both those. I mean, I think that all these big companies have struggled with revenue growth the last few quarters. The last quarter was a re-acceleration. I think most people expect another acceleration again this quarter, so Microsoft 16% growth, Google around 12%. Different trends going on there. I think for Microsoft, obviously the main focus is around the Azure cloud business, maybe kind of 28% organic growth. There's been this talk about kind of enterprise customers optimizing their spend, and some suggestions that maybe that optimization process has kind of run its course, and they're opening up the budgets again. For Google, it's really about the strength of their search business and advertising revenue. Is that picking up again?
Matt, thank you so much. Matt Bloxham there from Bloomberg Intelligence. We'll have plenty more throughout the day. This is Bloomberg.